On the night of the greatest invasion in history, as thousands of real paratroopers descended from the sky to begin the liberation of occupied Europe, something strange was happening across the darkened countryside. In areas far from the actual landings, enemy soldiers looked up to see parachutes drifting down out of the night, and they reacted with alarm, rushing to confront what appeared to be airborne troops. Landing in force, they scrambled units, diverted resources, and prepared to fight off an invasion in places where, in fact, no invasion was coming. For many of the parachutes they saw did not carry men at all. They carried dummies, decoys designed to look like paratroopers, part of an elaborate deception meant to confuse the enemy at the most crucial moment of the war. This is the story of the fake paratroopers and of how a clever deception helped protect the greatest invasion in history. This is a story about deception at the decisive moment, about the clever use of decoys and trickery to confuse the enemy and protect a vital operation. It is a story about how, at the most crucial juncture of the war, the success of the great invasion depended not only on the courage of the troops who landed, but on the cleverness of those who deceived the enemy about where and how the blow would fall. And it is a story about the imaginative, unconventional thinking that turned dummies dropped from the sky into a weapon of war. To understand the significance of the fake paratroopers, you have to understand the immense challenge of the Great Invasion and the crucial role that deception played in its success. The invasion of occupied Europe was one of the most ambitious and difficult military operations ever attempted, a massive amphibious and airborne assault against a heavily defended coast. The stakes could not have been higher. Success would open the way for the liberation of occupied Europe. Failure would be a catastrophe of immense proportions, and one of the greatest dangers facing the invasion was the possibility that the enemy, understanding where the blow would fall, could concentrate their forces to defeat it. The enemy had substantial forces available to defend against the invasion, but they could not be strong everywhere at once. They had to make decisions about where to concentrate their defenses, where to position their reserves, where to commit their forces when the invasion came. If they guessed correctly, if they concentrated their forces at the point of the actual landings, they could potentially overwhelm the invading troops before they could establish themselves. The success of the invasion therefore depended heavily on keeping the enemy uncertain and confused, on preventing them from concentrating their forces effectively against the real landings. This is why deception was so crucial to the invasion and why an elaborate effort was made to confuse and mislead the enemy about the nature and location of the assault. The deception took many forms, an entire campaign of trickery designed to keep the enemy uncertain, to divert their attention and their forces away from the actual landings, to create confusion at the crucial moment. The goal was to prevent the enemy from responding effectively, to keep them guessing and off balance, to ensure that they could not concentrate their forces against the real invasion. The fake paratroopers were one part of this larger deception effort. Now, we should be honest about the history here, because the use of dummy paratroopers as part of the deception surrounding the Great Invasion is a real and documented part of the history of the war. What follows is grounded in this genuine history, though we will tell it as a narrative to convey its full ingenuity. The core is true. As part of the deception operations surrounding the invasion, dummy paratroopers really were dropped in areas away from the actual landings, designed to deceive the enemy and draw their attention and forces away from the real assault. The details are recounted to convey the cleverness of this deception and its role in the success of the invasion. The concept of the fake paratroopers was ingenious. The idea was to drop dummies designed to resemble paratroopers in areas away from the actual landings. These dummies, descending by parachute, would appear to the enemy to be real airborne troops landing in force. The enemy, seeing the parachutes and the apparent paratroopers, would believe that an airborne assault was taking place in that area and would respond accordingly, diverting forces and attention to confront the apparent threat. By creating the illusion of airborne landings in false locations, the deception would draw the enemy's attention and forces away from the real landings, contributing to the confusion that was so essential to the invasion's success. The dummies themselves were designed to enhance the deception, to make the illusion as convincing as possible. They were made to resemble paratroopers, at least well enough to create the impression of real airborne troops, especially in the darkness and confusion of night. And the deception was often enhanced by additional effects designed to reinforce the impression of a real airborne landing. Devices that simulated the sounds of battle, of gunfire and combat, could be used to make the enemy believe that fighting was taking place, that real troops had landed and were engaging. These additional effects added to the realism of the deception, making the fake landings seem more convincing. The effect of this deception was to create confusion and uncertainty among the enemy at the crucial moment of the invasion. Seeing the apparent paratroopers and hearing the sounds of apparent battle, the enemy would respond to these false threats, diverting units to confront airborne landings that were not real. This response served the purposes of the invasion in several ways. It drew enemy forces away from the actual landings, reducing the forces available to oppose the real assault. It created confusion about where the real invasion was taking place, making it harder for the enemy to respond effectively. And it added to the general uncertainty and chaos that the deception campaign sought to create, keeping the enemy off balance at the decisive moment. Consider the cleverness of this deception, the imaginative thinking that turned dummies dropped from the sky into a weapon of war. The fake paratroopers exploited the enemy's expectations and fears, their knowledge that airborne troops were a part of the invasion, to create a convincing illusion. By dropping dummies that appeared to be paratroopers enhanced by simulated sounds of battle, the deception created the impression of real airborne landings, drawing the enemy's response. It was a brilliant example of psychological warfare, of using the enemy's own expectations against them to create confusion and divert their forces. The deception worked by manipulating what the enemy believed, turning their own assumptions into a vulnerability. The fake paratroopers were part of a broader pattern of deception that characterized the planning of the Great Invasion, a comprehensive effort to mislead and confuse the enemy. The success of the invasion depended heavily on this deception, on keeping the enemy uncertain about where and how the blow would fall. The various deception operations, including the fake paratroopers, worked together to create confusion, to divert the enemy's attention and forces, to prevent an effective response to the real landings. The deception was as important to the success of the invasion as the assault itself, a crucial element of the planning that helped ensure the operation's success. What does the story of the fake paratroopers reveal about the role of deception in warfare? First and foremost, it demonstrates the crucial importance of deception in military operations, the way that misleading and confusing the enemy can be as important as the direct application of force. The success of the Great Invasion depended heavily on the deception that confused the enemy and diverted their forces. This illustrates a fundamental principle of warfare, that deception can be a decisive factor, that keeping the enemy uncertain and confused can be as important as the strength of one's forces. The fake paratroopers were a brilliant example of this principle, a deception that contributed significantly to the success of a crucial operation. The story also illustrates the power of psychological manipulation, of exploiting the enemy's expectations and fears to achieve one's purposes. The fake paratroopers worked by manipulating what the enemy believed, by creating an illusion that exploited their knowledge and expectations. This kind of psychological manipulation, the shaping of the enemy's perceptions and beliefs, can be a powerful tool in warfare. By controlling what the enemy believes, one can influence their actions, drawing them into mistakes, diverting their forces, creating confusion. The fake paratroopers demonstrate the power of this psychological dimension of warfare, the way that manipulating perception can achieve significant military effects. Consider, too, the imaginative, creative thinking that conceived of the fake paratroopers, the willingness to consider unconventional approaches to the challenge of the invasion. The idea of dropping dummies to simulate airborne landings was a creative, unconventional solution, a clever way to deceive the enemy and divert their forces. This kind of imaginative thinking, the willingness to consider unconventional approaches, was essential to the deception effort. It illustrates the value of creativity in warfare, the way that imaginative, unconventional thinking can produce effective solutions to difficult challenges. The fake paratroopers were a product of this creative thinking, a clever deception born of imagination and ingenuity. There is a broader lesson here about the importance of misdirection, of drawing an opponent's attention away from one's true intentions. The fake paratroopers worked by misdirection, by drawing the enemy's attention and forces toward false threats and away from the real assault. This principle of misdirection, of focusing an opponent's attention where you want it, rather than where the real action is a powerful one, applicable in many areas beyond warfare. By controlling where an opponent focuses their attention, one can create opportunities, conceal one's true intentions, and gain an advantage. The fake paratroopers demonstrate the power of misdirection, a principle with wide application. It is worth reflecting on the meticulous planning that the deception required, the careful thought that went into creating an effective illusion. The fake paratroopers were not a haphazard effort, but a carefully planned deception designed to create a convincing illusion and to achieve specific effects. The planning involved consideration of where to drop the dummies, how to enhance the deception with additional effects, how to integrate the fake landings into the broader deception campaign. This meticulous planning was essential to the effectiveness of the deception, ensuring that it would create the desired confusion and divert the enemy's forces. The care that went into the planning reflects the importance that was placed on the deception effort. The fake paratroopers also illustrate the collaborative nature of the deception effort, the way that many elements work together to achieve the overall goal of confusing the enemy. The fake paratroopers were one part of a larger deception campaign, working in concert with other deception operations to create confusion and divert the enemy's forces. This collaborative dimension, the integration of many elements into a comprehensive deception effort, was essential to the success of the overall campaign. The fake paratroopers contributed to this larger effort, one element of a coordinated deception that helped ensure the success of the invasion. The story of the fake paratroopers stands as one of the most imaginative examples of deception from the entire war, a testament to the cleverness and creativity of those who planned the great invasion. The use of dummies to simulate airborne landings, enhanced by additional effects, created a convincing illusion that helped confuse the enemy and divert their forces at the crucial moment. It demonstrated the power of deception, of psychological manipulation, of misdirection in achieving military success. The fake paratroopers helped protect the greatest invasion in history, contributing to the confusion that was so essential to the operation's success. By the end of the war, the deception operations surrounding the great invasion, including the fake paratroopers, had taken their place among the most celebrated examples of military deception in history. The use of dummies to simulate airborne landings had helped confuse the enemy and divert their forces, contributing to the success of the crucial operation. It stood as a remarkable example of imaginative, creative thinking in the service of war, of the power of deception to achieve significant military effects. The fake paratroopers remained a memorable example of the cleverness that helped ensure the success of the greatest invasion in history. So remember the fake paratroopers, the dummies dropped from the sky to deceive the enemy at the most crucial moment of the war. Remember the cleverness of the deception, the creation of an illusion of airborne landings in false locations, enhanced by simulated sounds of battle, designed to draw the enemy's attention and forces away from the real assault. Remember the crucial role that this deception played in the success of the great invasion, contributing to the confusion that kept the enemy off balance and prevented an effective response. And remember the lessons the story teaches about the importance of deception in warfare, about the power of psychological manipulation and misdirection, and about the imaginative, creative thinking that turned dummies dropped from the sky into a weapon that helped protect the greatest invasion in history.